Nuclear fallout from bombs and tests killed thousands of people and animals with radiation-related illnesses. The relentless atomic tests of the Cold War resulted in health issues with the doses of radiation in the atmosphere and environment. Yet still, with all the protesting groups, none of them were able to make a change in disarming the United States, Soviet Union, and United Nations in the Cold War. Not even the three nations themselves could make an agreement, with several failed moratoriums in the past 8 years. After the Russians started testing again, within a week of breaking a testbed moratorium, something needed to take a stand.
The event of nuclear weapons changed the course of the world, as well as the war.
The Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed in Moscow, Russia, by U.S. Secretary of State Dean Rusk, Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko, and British Foreign Secretary Alec Douglas-Home on August 5, 1963, and put into effect October 10th in the same year. The Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty put a stop to all testing in the atmosphere, underwater, and outer space. While doing that, it also put a limit on all nuclear tests underground. Tests that would have radioactive debris fall outside the nation conducting it was prohibited. It made all nations that signed the treaty to work toward disarmament, an end to the Cold War, and an end to contaminating the environment. The treaty was the reaction from both sides of the Cold War, with nuclear fallout literally raining down on local towns and communities. This was the work of 8 years of meetings between the three nations, and also a new opportunity to reduce rapidly spreading nuclear fallout. This was, as President John F. Kennedy called it,
A concrete opportunity to extend its coverage to other nations.
Concerned groups had already formed before and after the first two bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, fearing nuclear war with the new development of atomic bombs. They were right. Though allies in World War II, the relationship between Soviet Russia and the United States was always rocky. The Americans disliked Joseph Stalin, the Russian premier at that time, because of his bloodthirsty and tyrannical rule. The Russians disliked America's delay in entering World War II, causing the deaths of many Russian soldiers. After the war, these feelings of distrust and enmity blossomed into aggression. American officials encouraged development of atomic weapons, so in 1949, when the Soviets tested their first atomic bomb, President Truman announced that America would build a new hydrogen bomb, nicknamed the Super Bomb. From then on, it was a bitter competition of who could build the strongest and most dangerous nuclear weapons the quickest. Now came a period of where slowing down arms development would be an invitation for the opposing country to attack. Later, this would be a large thorn in the side of disarming the two nations. Thus began the deadly arms race in 1949, also known as the Cold War. As nuclear threat slowly grows, with health risk and problems also increasing as the Cold War goes on, the need for some kind of means to disarm or just simply limit nuclear tests also grows. The Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty had an interesting relation with politics. Even after it was finally signed after 8 years of hard work, France and China still disagreed with it. A few years back, before the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was created, about 8 years before it was signed, in May 1955, the UN Disarmament Commission brought the US, UN, Soviet Union, Canada, and France to begin negotiations on ending nuclear weapons testing. Conflict soon arose when the topic of inspections about underground testing came around. The Russians feared that the inspections would lead to spying, exposing its vastly exaggerated claim of the amount of nuclear weapons they had developed. As this conflict arose, the US and the Soviet Union made an agreement to suspend all testing starting in 1958. The test suspension, also known as the 1958 Testbed Moratorium, paused all nuclear arms development. It was held successful, and the US was happy for the next 3 years. Then, on August 31st, 1961, Russia broke the 34-month-old moratorium. The Soviet Union justified itself by saying it needed to develop new nuclear weapons to defend itself from war threats from the US and the UN. A Soviet statement issued August 31st, 1963, said that it had designed super-powerful nuclear bombs with power equivalent to 100 million tons of TNT, and it was compelled to resume testing to avert a world war. Within 24 hours, the Russians tested its first bomb since November 15, 1958. This would soon lead to a US announcement that it also felt compelled to start testing again, too. The statement also said it was an open secret that the US was on the brink of testing again and about to resume testing underground. This would be true when the US resumed testing in 1962. John Fitzgerald Kennedy had opposed nuclear testing and supported a test ban since 1956, before he was even president. He believed that a ban would prevent other countries from obtaining nuclear weapons. He he took a strong stand about the issue in the 1960 presidential campaign, and once elected, Kennedy pledged to pause and stop testing in air and promised to pursue diplomatic efforts for a test ban treaty before testing underground. Kennedy had envisioned a test ban as being the first step toward disarmament in the Cold War and the future. Admiral Hyman Rickover discusses why it is important to keep ahead of the Soviets in the arms race in his 1960 speech.
The greatest problem facing the government and people of the United States today is the contest forced upon us by the totalitarian bloc captained by Soviet Russia. If we fail in this contest, its outcome determines whether we survive as an independent democratic nation.
Once Russia broke the test ban moratorium, Kennedy became discouraged by Soviet testing, but still tried to pursue diplomatic efforts before abandoning the idea and resuming testing on April 25, 1962. About a year before the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was created, Mao Zedong and other Chinese officials had decided to advance nuclear arms development during the mid-1950s. Kennedy and his advisors thought it unwise to leave China with a power like this. So, to prevent China from achieving nuclear arms, Kennedy and his advisors agreed that the best action was to form a test ban treaty with the Soviet Union. A treaty would raise pressure on China and halt their efforts to arm themselves with nuclear weapons. This would soon lead to the creation of a test ban treaty, particularly the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. More and more reasons why the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was necessary in its time period was shown with examples from the years before. During the 1953 Upshot Knot Hole atomic test series, cattle, horses, and sheep had been spending the winter in pastures approximately 80 kilometers north of the Nevada testing zone. A few cattle died, several horses had lesions on their backs, but the sheep were especially impacted hard, with several thousand dying. 12% of all pregnant female sheep died in the area, and a fourth of newborn lambs died within 3 weeks of the next atomic test. Shot Harry. Sheep that were born often had sores on their snouts, and when their wool was short, it would just separate with the skin, exposing large scabs on its body. The Atomic Energy Commission's inspectors declared that the cause of death was malnutrition and the consumption of poisonous plants. They said that the poison had made the sheep's snouts sensitive to light and caused burn marks to look like beta burns. An inspector for the state of Utah, specialist in poisonous plants, said that plants could not have been the cause of deaths and burn marks. The AEC told him to mind Utah's business, not Nevada's. The truth came out in 1979, when U.S. Congress began investigating AEC actions taken during the testing program, and that the AEC had been responsible for sheep deaths. The AEC carefully avoided any questions that would bring information holding it responsible for the deaths of the sheep, as it could also easily be held responsible for deaths of humans that had happened before. This whole thing was mainly a factor of the Atomic Energy Commission refusing to acknowledge serious health impacts from radiation and fear human deaths would be blamed on them. President Kennedy chose Averell Harriman, an experienced diplomat that was also respected by Premier Khrushchev, to resume negotiations for a test ban in Moscow on July 13, 1963. An arrangement to shorten the extent of a test ban treaty was essential, as the negotiators decided to leave underground tests alone, and that took away the need for the on-site inspections that worried Khrushchev. 12 days after negotiations on July 25, 1963, the US and the Soviet Union agreed to create a test ban to ban testing in the atmosphere, underwater, and outer space. One exception though. When asked to sign the treaty, France refused, making clear that until there was an agreement on complete nuclear disarmament, French plans to conduct tests would go forward. The next day, in America, Kennedy broadcasted a speech in a television address that a test ban
is safer by far for the United States than an unlimited nuclear arms race.
So, when the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed on August 5, 1963, both nations celebrated. Even though radiation-related health problems weren't completely unavoidable, they were greatly reduced. With support of the sheep mystery to emphasize health problems, the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was a stand for humanity in an arms race, paving the road for future treaties, such as the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, approved in 1996, which ended all nuclear explosions, including those underground. With testing having a severe impact on the environment, along with the growing hostility between the US and the Soviet Union, the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was needed as a boundary to prevent having the Hiroshima bomb happen again. This treaty certainly took a stand in history. It took a stand against polluting the environment with nuclear fallout, it took a stand against the rising levels of radiation causing health problems, and also as a stand against atomic testing worldwide.